Formation was at 0600, Sergeant, not 15 minutes later. What is this? Your first day in the Corps? The words hit like a whip, followed by snickers from the line. Sergeant Kara Vance didn't blink. She adjusted her rifle strap, gaze steady, letting the words drift away like desert wind. Then the desert range fell silent. Every rifle stopped mid-drill. Colonel Damon Reeve didn't speak. He just walked, slow and deliberate, toward the honor wall. Gunnery Sergeant Mason Harlan followed, still certain the quiet woman was just another careless Marine. But when the colonel pointed to a brass plate and ordered him to read the name aloud, those letters changed everything. The platoon had just witnessed a ghost of the range in action. Morning lays a ribbon of gold across the desert range. Dust, CLP, and cold brass scent the air. Flags twitch on thin poles, undecided about the crosswind. Steel silhouettes stand in ordered rows at a horizon beginning to shimmer. A company of Marines holds formation, boots squared, chins level, rifles slung high. No one talks. Discipline lives in small sounds. At 6:15, Sergeant Kara Vance steps into that clockwork. She does not rush. She does not fold her shoulders in apology or reach for a softer rule. A battered pelican case rides the diagonal of her back. She hikes the strap a notch higher, a practiced gesture that looks like routine rather than nerves, then finds her slot at the far edge. Heads turn, curiosity sparks, then settles. Kara plants her feet as if beginning a long, quiet hold. Gunnery Sergeant Mason Harlan turns as if pulled by a compass needle. Tall without theatrics, exact without vanity, he carries a reputation carved by repetition. Dull things done perfectly prevent funerals. His sleeves look ironed with a ruler and his eyes forgive nothing. He does not raise his voice, he sharpens it. Formation was at 0600, Sergeant, not 15 minutes later. We build habits. Bad ones get people hurt. Kara lets the sentence pass like grit on glass. She adjusts nothing except her breathing, which steadies by choice. Her gaze stays respectful, offset just enough to keep the environment in frame. Roger, Gunny. Harlan pivots to the company, using Kara's lateness as caution rather than cudgel. You want to lead? Arrive. Time is not decor, it is accountability. Show me a late Marine, and I will show you a slipping timeline. Movement, comms, fires, medevac. Cracks begin small. He walks the ranks with 2 finger corrections, a sling tightened, an elbow lowered, a scope cap removed. He never lingers, never repeats. Strict, consistent, allergic to shortcuts that insult the clock, he lets the desert amplify the lesson and strip the excuses. Kara watches without stepping onto that stage. She studies the wind in layers. Near flags for tempo, midfield scrub for rhythm, far dust filaments for truth. Mirage boils over the long lanes. Even the steel softens at the edges. She files what she sees where her hands can reach when the glass comes up. The range is starting to argue with itself, and arguments reward listeners who can separate voice from echo. Whatever debt she owes the minute hand, she intends to pay the target. End of the line, Harlan says. You will fire last. Earn back the time you took. A few Marines trade glances that mix relief with curiosity. Last is where patience goes to fail. It is also where composure proves whether it is real or borrowed. Kara's expression does not change. The range wakes. Mats unfurl. Bipods bite rubber. Bolts run slick, then still. Spotters glass the flags and call tentative numbers. Left point 4, now right point 2, already behind the air's mood swings. Heat lifts in thin ribbons off the sand. The ridge throws a white glare across the targets. Downrange, a pale streamer on the berm argues with nearer pennants. The valley disagrees with itself in 3 directions at once. Kara carries her case to lane 12, the far edge, and sets it down. She squares her mat to the lanes and smooths the corners so gusts cannot lift them. She does not open the latches yet. Up on the observation deck, Colonel Damon Reeve lowers his binoculars and studies the small math of composure. Economy of motion, breath discipline, attention. He is measuring the listener. Harlan raises a hand. Cold bore at 900 when your lane is called. Then movers. Read, decide, commit. Do not chase. The rules are simple because the physics are cruel. He walks the line again. a steel ruler checking a drawing, and the company tightens toward the picture in his head. Kara remains a quiet hinge at the end of the array, still as a held breath. She may be late to formation, but she is on time for the mission. That difference will not be argued. It will be measured. In wind, in steel, and in silence. Harlan stepped into the center of the company as if onto a stage, letting silence grow taut before he plucked it like a wire. "Sergeant Vance," he said, voice even and public by design, "we do not grade intentions, we grade outcomes. Outcomes begin with time. 0600 is a contract." Fabric whispered as bodies tightened. No one laughed this time. Harlan's gaze swept the ranks. Posture, spacing, muzzles, hands, eyes. Show up late. And what arrives late next? Movement. Comms. Everything you swear won't slip, slips. He closed his fist. That is how cracks begin. Kara did not bargain with the moment. No apology costume, no defiant theater. She stood in that quiet, absorbing without surrendering a millimeter of poise. "Roger, Gunny," she said, flat as steel. Wind lifted grit, then let it fall. Harlan widened the arc, making the reprimand communal. "You want to lead?" he told the line. "Start by arriving. Boring on time beats brilliant too late." He moved down the ranks like a steel ruler. Two-finger corrections, a tapped helmet brim, a sling tightened, never lingering, never repeating. His reputation, strict, consistent, allergic to lateness. He believes dull things done perfectly prevent funerals. Here is the part we do not like to admit. On the parade ground, Polish masquerades as competence. Creases and symmetry become proxies for judgment and nerve. It is easy to grade the visible and ignore the vital. A Marine can shine at inspection and fail uncertainty. Another can look scuffed and run circles around chaos. Garrison incentives tilt toward what photographs well. Combat punishes that bias. The hard habit is refusing to equate surface with substance. Up on the observation deck, Colonel Damon Reeve watched the same scene through older eyes. He had given Harlan's speech himself. He agreed with every syllable and distrusted any that tried to be universal law. What interested him now was metabolism under pressure. Kara's did not spike. It settled. Breathing eased. Micro-motions stilled. No jaw clicks. No eye hunting. She shifted once to give her young spotter a cleaner angle without crowding him. Her kit told its own quiet biography. The Pelican case wore honest wear. Foam collapsed along a consistent loadout. Hinges bright from care. Stickers from ranges that do not sell souvenirs. When she adjusted the strap, she used thumb and forefinger, not a yank. Economy like that is a signature. Training hardened into reflex. Reeve lowered his binoculars because glass can lie. Magnification invites theater. What he saw at human distance was the poise of a practitioner, not the shrug of a slacker. The stillness had edges, like a blade left in a sheath. Harlan set his wager where everyone could see it. "End of the line," he said. "You fire last. Earn back the time you took." The words were not unkind. They were intentional. Public debts get paid in public. If she underperformed, the premise would stand. If she excelled, the standard sharpened anyway. He faced the company again. Cold bore at 900. Then movers. Red. Decide. Commit. Do not chase. The range woke into its working music. Bolts, bipods, breath cues, spotters calling mirage and flag angles. Heat began to boil thinly over the flats. The wind argued with itself like a committee. Kara moved to lane 12, set her case down, and did nothing theatrical. She watched the wind in layers, pennants near, scrub mid, dust far. The quiet around her was not hesitation, it was timing. She aligned her mat square and smoothed the corners so gusts could not lift them. The lecture had landed, the mission remained. Public correction is a blunt tool that cuts both ways. It clarifies standards and distorts perception. Once a story is announced, late equals sloppy, confirmation bias starts farming evidence. Peers will remember the lecture even if performance contradicts it. Leaders must resist rooting for their own narratives. Reeve kept watching for the small tells. Kara's attention coned rather than tunneled. She seemed to hold room for the speaker, the environment, and the task without letting anyone swallow the others. He had seen that vector in a JTAC building, a 9-line. in a medic threading a needle under fire, in a pilot holding short when crosswind numbers felt liar slick. Calculation without advertisement. Harlan raised a hand. The line froze. Time to let reality weigh in. Reeve felt the familiar hinge where theater ends and competence begins. If the company learned anything today, he wanted it to be this. Discipline is not the suit, it is the skeleton. Surface might win inspection. Substance wins uncertainty. He breathed once, slow and careful, and let the range decide the truth about both of them. Whatever story had been spoken aloud would stand or shatter under steel, wind, and time. The order rolled down the line like a pressure wave, and the range answered with heat. Mirage writhed over the flats, turning sight pictures into rumor. Near flags snapped left to right. Scrub 30 meters out leaned the other way. A pale streamer on the far berm pulsed to its own drummer. Crosswinds stacked in bands with clashing tempos. The movers, steel silhouettes on tracks, jerked alive and faded, their exposure windows trimmed to seconds. Distance cards read simple numbers. The air made them personal. Bolts cycled up and down the line, steady then frantic, as the wind changed its mind. Spotters called corrections and swallowed them a heartbeat later. Some Marines chased, others froze. Harlan prowled like a taut wire along the firing points. "Don't write novels with your turrets," he said. 2/10. Decide. Commit. The desert paid no attention. Dust devils sprang, ran a dozen meters, died, then rose again as if reconsidering. At lane 12, the noise thinned. Kara knelt, set the battered Pelican case on the mat, and snapped the latches with 2 clean clicks. She lifted the lid as if opening a toolbox, not a treasure chest. Nestled in foam lay a customized M210. Stock smoothed where cheek met comb. Bolt slick from patient care. Glass spotless. Nothing gaudy, a sensible muzzle device, a sling that knew her shoulder, a plain bipod. She ran a fingertip around the crown and looked once through the bore, a ritual as much about focus as function. She slid out a thin, battered notebook and opened to a page that smelled faintly of oil and dust. Dope lived there in tidy script. Density altitude from similar mornings, wind brackets for this valley, notes about afternoon thermals around the rocks beyond 800. She didn't memorize the lines. She woke them. Check parallax. Firm the rear bag. Settle bipod feet into the mat. Each motion had a cost and a reason, and she paid both without waste. Kara studied the wind in layers. Near flag for beat, mid-scrub for rhythm, far dust for truth. She watched the bands argue and picked the voice that tended to win. She rolled her shoulders, exhaled to half-lung, and let the reticle settle not on a target, but on the sliver of air, a wind band to the left. She was not ignoring Harlan's lecture. She was translating it. Time repaid not with apology, but with precision. Her young spotter hunched into his glass, intent and a fraction too tight. Kara shifted half a step so his shoulder had space. She didn't look at him. She made room. Timing, attention, restraint, the quiet grammar of competence clicked together around lane 12. "Lane 12, send it!" The call reached her like a metronome tick. Kara took the shot in the quiet between heartbeats. The M210 coughed, recoil pressed and released. Seconds later, the steel at 900 rang with a bell-clear note that cut the range in half. The spotter blinked. "Impact, center." She worked the bolt with a motion borrowed from breath. The first mover eased in at 600, quartering left to right, exposure 3 seconds. She didn't chase the reticle. She led with timing, letting the target arrive at the solution. Crack, ping. Hit! The next mover popped at 480, a stutter step pattern designed to induce panic. She refused the invitation. Crack, ping. Hit! The third drifted from 850 and tried to vanish behind shimmer. She trusted the dust thread, shaded, sent. Hit! Up and down the line, rifles paused mid-breath. A trio of Marines forgot to swear. Another stopped dialing and started thinking. The wind tried a new personality. Kara gave it no special respect. 1 click, half a hold, then nothing when the dustband said it was bluffing. She ran the course like an argument settled without raising a voice. Every shot felt less like a guess proven right and more like a rule enforced. Lane 12, sequence 2. New distances, meaner angles, exposure shaved tighter. She drank the pattern, spat the noise, and stayed on the metronome. Crack, ping. Crack, ping. A miss threatened once. The mover accelerated out of a lull as Mirage fattened, but a pencil note about the rock line beyond 800 flashed. She shaded a breath more, and the steel agreed. Hit! By the last string, nobody pretended not to watch. Even Harlan's patrol slowed. The desert made no sound except the wind arguing with itself and the measured punctuation of an M210 speaking in complete sentences. Kara closed with a final round that slotted into dead center of a target others had been grateful just to touch. The range went still, not shock, recognition. Competence has a sound when denial runs out of places to hide. Kara safed the rifle, lifted her head, and breathed once, evenly. The spotter let out something between a laugh and a prayer. Down the line, bolts resumed, then faltered, as if the Marines had to relearn what they'd been trying to do the morning. Harlan stopped 3 paces behind lane 12 and said nothing. He didn't need to. The course had spoken in a voice the company trusted. Steel cooled. Mirage kept boiling. The wind continued to lie. Under it all, something plain settled. Deserts punish pretense, and this morning they rewarded a practitioner who wasted nothing. Not motion, not breath, not time. Colonel Damon Reeve set his binoculars on the rail and came down the observation steps without a word. Marines kept their hands busy, but their eyes followed. Harlan straightened by reflex. Reeve crossed the sand with the economy of a man who moves only when it matters. He headed for the honor wall, sun-baked brick near the range office, studded with brass plates burnished by 1,000 fingertips. Decades of names lived there, a ledger of work done well under hard conditions. The newest plates gleamed. The oldest were dark as coins. Up close, the wall smelled faintly of polish and heat. Reeve paused and scanned the columns, going to the seam where generations meet. He read silently, head tilting by a degree. Behind him, the range settled. Harlan arrived 2 paces to the colonel's right and stopped without speaking. The company clustered in small knots, contained by protocol and curiosity. Lane 12 stayed in peripheral awareness like a steady candle. Reeve's finger moved down a column, paused, moved again. Each stop opened a memory, teams, dates, odd corners of the world. He found the name he had been walking toward since the first shot cracked open the morning. A small satisfaction folded into his breath. He stepped half a pace left to make room and raised 2 fingers to summon Harlan. When the gunny stood within earshot, Reeve kept his gaze on the wall. "Read it," he said, quiet. The words were for accuracy, not theater. Harlan leaned in. Sunlight flashed off the brass. He blinked once and read aloud because the order had used his voice. "Unit, 1st Marine Raider Battalion," he began, each word clean. "Designation, Lead Scout Sniper," he continued. "Deployments," he stopped on the dash and the small word stamped after it. "Classified." A stir moved the air behind them, as if the platoon had exhaled at once. Harlan read the next line. "Awards, Bronze Star with Combat V, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Purple Heart." He swallowed before the last detail. Name, Sergeant Kara Vance. The cadence of his reading had no drama to hide behind. It stripped the moment to facts, and facts spoken plainly can feel heavier than any shout when a unit knows what they imply. The wall did not react. The brass simply declared what was already true. Harlan straightened a fraction, then set his shoulders. He looked at the plate as if it might offer a revision. It did not. Certainty tugged, then relented. Reeve let the silence hold so the words could land once. He shifted his attention from the plaque to Harlan with no heat in it. The colonel was not gloating. He was conducting. "Now you know who you were speaking to," he said. Not rebuke, context. Harlan finally turned. Kara had stood from the mat and was clearing her area with quiet thoroughness. Brass policed, glass capped, sling stowed. She did not step forward, did not shrink back. She finished the work. When she sensed the 2 men facing her, she squared and waited. Reeve crossed the last meters. The company parted without being told. He halted at arm's length. For a beat, all you could hear was the flag tether tapping its pole. The colonel raised his hand and delivered a sharp, perfect salute to a sergeant who had paid her dues where it counted. It was not a favor and not a play. It was an acknowledgement across rank of a standard kept. Kara returned the salute with the same economy she had used all morning. "Sir," she said. The syllable carried no triumph. Reeve lowered his hand. "Sergeant Vance," he said, "we appreciate the demonstration." Not performance, demonstration. He looked to Harlan. "Gunny." Harlan stepped forward. He had taught hundreds of lessons. Some days the range taught him back. He set his boots, accepted the moment, and found the tone the company deserved. "Sergeant Vance," he said steady, "point made and received. I will not mistake shine for substance again." It wasn't surrender, it was recalibration. Marines breathed a little deeper. They would tell this story badly at lunch. Someone always made the colonels walk longer, the salute sharper, the hits more impossible. But the core would stay intact. A quiet professional had stepped into a noisy space and bent it toward truth. The wall had only said it out loud. Reeve turned back to the brass. His finger rested against her name long enough to pick up heat. He had seen too many walls to mistake this one for an ending. The value of a plaque is not reverence, it is calibration. It tells you what the unit is capable of when it takes itself seriously. He looked at Kara. "You're assigned here temporarily," he said, not quite a question. Kara nodded. "Yes, sir." "Then let's make the most of it," Reeve said. He meant the platoon, the standard, the story they would hand to the next Marines who needed it. He swept the line. "Back to work." The range woke again, not louder, but clearer. Targets reset, bolts cycled, notes were scribbled to be read when the wind lied again. Harlan moved toward lane 12. "When you've got time," he said to Kara, "let me see the dope book." She handed it over without ceremony. He opened to the page she had used. The handwriting was spare and legible. There were notes he wouldn't have thought to keep and omissions that told him she did certain math in her head. He exhaled. "All right," he said, more to himself than to her. "All right." The wall stood in the heat, indifferent and exact. Names don't make shooters. Work makes names. The company returned to their lanes carrying the difference in their bones. In the telling, the colonel walked to the wall. In the living, the wall walked back with them. The range noise thinned to a respectful hush as Colonel Damon Reeves stepped in front of Kara Vance. He didn't speak first. He raised his hand in a crisp salute, the exact same salute he would render to any Marine who had just met the standard under pressure. The gesture said more than an accolade. It acknowledged time, work, and a craft honed where witnesses are rare. Kara returned the salute with the same economy she had loaded into her shots. No pride on display, no claim staked, just recognition received, filed, and carried forward. Reeves' voice came quiet, the way you talk when the important part has already been proven. "Sergeant Vance, well executed, and on behalf of this command, my apology for the reception." He didn't elaborate or perform contrition. He set it down like a tool, precise and useful. "We'll be better." "Understood, sir," Kara said. There was no victory in her tone, because the win wasn't over a person, it was over a misconception. Around them, Marines absorbed the exchange like a calibration of what matters and what doesn't. The honor wall glinted in the sun without comment. Later, when the targets were cooling and the wind had shifted from stubborn to sly, a young lance corporal drifted toward lane 12, carrying more questions than courage. He was Kara's spotter from earlier. Good eyes, stiff shoulders, and a habit of choking the scope like it might run away if he didn't hold it hard enough. "Ma'am, Sergeant," he corrected, "how did you pick the band to trust? The flags were lying, the dust kept changing, I kept chasing." Kara set her rifle down and pointed to the range as if it were a chalkboard. "Layers," she said. "Near flags for tempo, mid-scrub for rhythm, far dust for truth. Don't marry any single source. Date all three and see who keeps their word over time." She knelt, scooped a pinch of sand, and let it fall in a thin stream. "Count. 1, 2, 3, gust on 4. If it keeps happening, it's a pattern, not a coincidence." He frowned. "But when it breaks?" "Then you don't chase the last gust," she said. "You forecast the next one. You're always shooting into where the wind will be, not where it was. If you find yourself writing a novel on your turrets, you're negotiating with chaos instead of managing it. She adjusted his stance by a centimeter, rolled his shoulder down, eased his cheek well to hair. Economy. The more you move, the more you lie to yourself. Let the environment move. You stay steady. He nodded, then hesitated. I thought being on time and being squared away was enough. It's the start, Kara said. But polish is a uniform you wear for other people. Competence is a skeleton you carry for yourself. When conditions get ugly, the suit falls away. What holds you up then is bone. He smiled despite himself. You always talk like that? Only when the wind cooperates, she said. And the joke landed because he understood now. She wasn't mystical, just methodical. She handed him her battered notebook. Copy the bands for this valley. Add your notes after 2 more evolutions. If your pages don't match mine, figure out if the air changed or you did. He took the book like a loan he intended to repay. By evening chow, a story was already walking the base in half-fitted boots. How the quiet sergeant answered a public reprimand with a public clinic. How the colonel made the wall speak. How the gunny recalibrated in view of his Marines. Details grew taller in the telling, but the parts that mattered stayed true. Harlan changed first in the way that counts. He didn't get softer. He got sharper about where sharpness belonged. The next morning's formation still landed at 600. Creases still met standards, but his inspections bent away from theater and toward function. He asked shooters why their data matched their dope, how they were compensating for the day's density altitude, where their sling tension failed them under recoil. He stopped rewarding noise and started rewarding thought. He also made a habit of asking, "What did you see?" after each evolution, and he meant the environment, not the person in the mirror. Marines began to talk in wind bands, mirage types, and terrain effects instead of generic grumbling about bad air. The unit's language shifted. With it, so did performance. Kara's influence spread in smaller currents. A corporal in the 2nd platoon started keeping a wind log. A sergeant who had treated his spotter like a tripod began treating him like a teammate. The young lance corporal stopped strangling his scope and started listening for the 4-count gust Kara had taught him. On the 3rd day, his first round impact at 850 rang clean enough to pull a grin out of Harlan himself. Small, quick, but there. The honor wall became less of a shrine and more of a reference point. Marines touched the brass not to worship names, but to remember the standard the names represented. Reeve, for his part, gave Harlan runway to lead the change. He didn't co-opt the lesson, he amplified it. That restraint told the company as much about leadership as any speech. At the end of the story, what lasts isn't the ping of steel or the shine of a uniform. It's the reminder to look twice before we judge. In today's America, on factory floors and small businesses, union halls, churches, and senior centers, we often mistake polish for proof. Being on time matters, so does looking squared away. But when pressure rises, it's quiet competence that carries the day. The people who keep their heads, do their homework, and act without fanfare are the ones who steady the rest of us. There's a leadership lesson here too. When truth shows up, real leaders adjust. A public apology, a sincere salute, and a willingness to change course are not weakness, they're strength you can trust. Many of our elders have modeled this for decades, raising families, running shops, serving in uniform, admitting mistakes quickly so the team could move forward. In a noisy era, humility is still the fastest way to rebuild trust. And then there's mentorship. Kara didn't just shoot well, she taught well. That's a blueprint for everyday life. Pass along what you know. Teach a grandchild to listen before speaking. Show a new coworker how to read the wind in tough meetings. Help a neighbor keep calm during a crisis. Fewer moves, better moves. That's how standards outlive the moment and strengthen a community across generations. I'll leave you with a thought to spark debate. If a crisis hit your workplace tomorrow, who would you want in charge? The loudest voice or the calmest hands? Have you known a quiet professional in your life? A nurse, bus driver, teacher, or veteran who changed the day without asking for applause? What matters more to you, punctual polish or unshakable skill under pressure? Share your stories below. I read them, and our community learns from them. Thank you for spending time with this episode. If it resonated, please leave a comment, tap like, and subscribe so you won't miss what's next. And if you'd like a follow-up, perhaps the day Kara is called for a mission no one sees coming, tell me in the comments. Be safe, stay steady, and let the quiet work speak.